Hmm. You know, we have a lot of movies coming out this month with the word man in the title. Better Man, Dogman, and, of course, Wolfman. But man, let me tell you, I'm hoping the animated kids movie from DreamWorks turns out to be a better Dogman movie than Lee Winnell's Wolfman, because man, this movie was kind of a huge bore.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
Welcome to yet another episode of Round the Clock Frights. My name is Josh, and like it or not, 2025 is here. But, you know, us horror fans have plenty to look forward to. I mean, we got some really interesting looking horror movies coming out this year, and, you know, some of the ones I'm kind of excited about. I mean, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, I'm sure that's going to be amazing. 28 years later, oh man, let me tell you. So, the trailer for that was incredibly eerie and really got under my skin. Not just because it has some Teletubbies in it, but because the audio they use in the trailer is just so unnerving. But definitely looking forward to a lot of horror movies this year. But this is actually the second horror movie that I've gotten to watch this year. The first one was The Damned, which I didn't talk about in the video, but let's just say I wasn't too impressed with that one. But Lee Winnell's Wolfman was one I was greatly anticipating because I did really enjoy his take on The Invisible Man, which came out in 2020. You know, that movie had themes of gaslighting, you know, spouse abuse, and it was incredibly well done, with an exceptional lead performance by Elizabeth Moss. So I heard that he was going to do Wolfman next, and my first thought was, Wolfman, I mean, that's definitely a more supernatural story, so it's definitely going to be different from The Invisible Man, but you know, I was curious to see what Lee Winnell could do with the story, and he is someone who is familiar with all the horror tropes. In fact, when he was writing Insidious, he said in an interview that he wanted to avoid as many haunted house tropes as possible, so I figured he would try to do something new with the werewolf formula, and, you know, this movie has a couple of things going for it, but, you know, real quick, let me just tell you the story of, you know, how I went to go see this movie. I actually worked as a manager at a movie theater, so I got to see it for free. I know, perks, but you know, probably the best part of the job, you know, apart from cleaning up the occasional cum stain. Anyway, I grabbed a couple of friends and we went to go see this movie, and it wasn't like too busy, but one of my friends ended up listening to music on his phone the entire time, and two of us laughed at several parts, so yeah, needless to say, none of us were really big fans of this movie.
Hello? Can anyone hear me? Hello? We were in an accident.
Daddy, are we gonna die?
No.
Jesus, tap dancing Christ, is this thing ever gonna end?
But yeah, like I mentioned, this movie does have a couple of neat ideas, but ultimately it is a very, very standard werewolf movie, and I mean, it has undercooked story elements, it has an incredibly annoying child actress, and it has a disappointing as hell werewolf design, which, by the way, let's talk about the werewolf design in this movie, because if there was anything I was looking forward to in Lee Winnell's Wolfman, it was the overall look of the monster. You know, I'm a sucker for creative, creepy monster designs, and this movie just doesn't deliver because we've gotten some really iconic werewolf movies over the years. I mean, An American Werewolf in London, Ginger Snaps, and even 2004's Van Helsing, which, by the way, turning Hugh Jackman into a werewolf is probably the biggest masterstroke in the history of humanity, because Hugh Jackman is my bae, and seeing him as a werewolf, that was pretty doggone cool, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, the werewolf design in this movie, it's good to know that Chewbacca found employment after Disney's Star Wars trilogy, because the werewolf in this movie looks like a less hairy Chewbacca. And you know, I read in an interview that Lee Winnell was heavily inspired by David Cronenberg movies, particularly The Fry, so I was expecting something really grotesque and disgusting, and it didn't really deliver on that front. Although I do like the idea of the werewolf design, you know, being more gradual. You know, it doesn't happen, you know, all at once. You know, seeing his body gradually decompose over time as if he has caught some flesh-eating disease. Honestly, that's a pretty gnarly concept, but the movie doesn't go far enough, you know, with this concept, because there are a couple of kind of gross moments. You know, there's a scene where we see, you know, how decayed his arm has become. You know, there's a couple of moments where we see some teeth falling out, but this movie could have gone so much further. I mean, where was the scene of Gina Davis grabbing onto his jaw and just ripping it clean off? I mean, this movie needed more disgusting stuff like that because, I don't know, I guess I was expecting more in the body horror department. So, the general plot of this movie. Christopher Abbott plays this mentally scarred man who is desperately trying to be a good parent to his young daughter because he didn't have the best childhood, growing up. So, you have him, and then you have Julia Garner, who plays his wife, and she's a workaholic mother who doesn't spend enough time with her family. So of course you get that plot line where she wants to connect with her daughter more, but ultimately they decide to spend more time as a family by going out to the countryside and spending some time in his father's old house because apparently the father has either passed away or gone missing. I can't remember which one. But of course, there's a werewolf in the woods, and Christopher Abbott gets infected by the werewolf virus, and spooky shenanigans ensue. He does eventually become the Wolfman, not Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman. But yeah, that's pretty much the general plot of this movie. So I'm gonna get into some mild spoilers for this movie because you all know me, I'm a big story guy. I mean, I'm an aspiring screenwriter myself, so of course I'd be paying attention to the storytelling in this movie, and I had some pretty big issues with the writing in this movie because right off the bat, you get a 20-minute long prologue sequence that drags on for far too long and honestly isn't even that dramatic or enthralling. You basically see the backstory of Christopher Abbott's character. When he was a kid, he lived alone with his, tough militaristic father. This father who takes him out into the woods to go humping. He's to go humping. I'm gonna leave that in. Maybe not. No, I'm gonna leave it in. No, he does not train him to go humping. He trains him to go hunting in the woods, and he's very tough, very stern, and I guess they're trying to set up the idea that he was a semi-abusive father, but not really. I mean, he doesn't do anything that terrible to his son. I mean, he's hard on him, but it's not like he, physically abuses him or anything. So, I don't know. I didn't think it was particularly compelling, and it spends way too much time on this backstory, far too long. And this is definitely something that should have been spread out more throughout the entire course of the movie instead of giving it to us all at once. Give us like little snippets throughout the movie. Give us snippets of the father being really abusive towards his son, mentally scarring him, traumatizing him. Have scenes where Christopher Abbott has these haunting flashbacks to his childhood, as an adult. Even like when he's transforming into a werewolf, have him, think about the times where he was quote unquote abused by his father. Instead of just dumping everything, on us all at once at the beginning of the movie. I think it would have been way more compelling if they had done it like that, but that was one issue that I had. There's also some relationship issues between the two parents in this movie, particularly, from the mother who feels very distant, from her daughter and longs to connect with her again, because as I mentioned, she's workaholic and she doesn't spend enough time with her family. She feels like Christopher Abbott has a better connection with her daughter. So that could have been a good story arc for Julia Garner's character, but to be honest, it doesn't really go anywhere because she does become a bit more protective of her daughter, particularly in the second half of the film, but there aren't many emotional moments between the two of them. They don't really talk a lot, so she should have had like an Ellen Ripley moment at the end of this movie where she, just goes, full-on badass mama bear mode, and granted, she kind of does, but I definitely thought there was much more that they could have done, with her story. And also, the climax of this movie is incredibly lame and unsatisfying. The way they confront the werewolf at the end of this movie, I mean, you couldn't have come up with something a little bit more exciting. I mean, I understand, Lee, if you didn't want to conform to the typical, methods of, defeating a werewolf, i.e. silver bullets and whatnot. But, I mean, come on, just give us something a little bit more enthralling. I mean, talk shit about Van Helsing all you want, but in that film's climax, we get a freaking brawl between a werewolf and a winged vampire demon. I mean, how much more awesome could you get? So, I just thought the climax of this movie was really lame, and the way that they ultimately defeat this thing, I don't know, it was lame, and it didn't even work on an emotional level because I just wasn't really invested in these characters' lives. I mean, this movie just didn't give me much to latch onto in the emotional department. But yeah, horror fam, the film does have a couple of unique, neat ideas. We get to see the werewolf's POV, which was actually pretty cool. How the werewolf sees the world, it's very disoriented, and whenever he looks at a person, they have like these bright lights in their eyes, like their eyes start flashing white, and I thought that was actually pretty neat. There's a very disorienting shot where a character is standing in the woods, and you just see the trees, stretch out, and the image starts getting like all, messed up and disoriented. So a couple of neat visual tricks that they do in this movie. And Christopher Abbott does a decent enough job, playing a doomed father in this movie, which I guess originally Ryan Gosling was supposed to be the lead in this movie, but I can kind of understand why Ryan Gosling ran away from this movie. Honestly, I think the material is kind of beneath him. And oh, by the way, I do think Christopher Abbott was a good choice because, like Lon Chaney Jr. in the original Wolfman, he has a very sad-looking face. His face is, kind of droopy, and his eyes are just kind of sullen, much like Lon Chaney Jr. in the original movie, which instantly makes for a very sympathetic character because he just looks like a sad sack. He looks like a very sad man, so instantly we do kind of sympathize with him in that regard. Oh, and another issue I had with this movie, the freaking cinematography. I mean, there were some scenes that were so underlit. There's a scene in a barn where the mother and her daughter are trying to hide from the Wolfman, and I could barely see what was going on. Their faces were kind of lit, but it was almost looking like looking at a completely black screen. I mean, there just weren't enough light sources in that scene, and there are so many nighttime scenes that are like that, just very dreary looking, and yeah, you can't really tell what's going on. But yeah, overall guys, this was just a very disappointing slog of a monster movie. It could have been like so much better, and it's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it could have been so much more. Although, one more quick note, I think they made a reference to the movie Ginger Snaps, because the daughter's name in this movie is Ginger. So, at least they're paying homage to much better werewolf movies, but this movie's going to be quickly forgotten. And Lee Winnall, I saw what you're going with the whole, generational trauma thing, but yeah, some rewrites definitely weren't necessary in this case. But guys, hey, 2025 is just getting started. Yay! So, we do have a lot of horror films to look forward to this year. I'm personally excited. That's how I'm going to keep myself distracted this year, is just consuming as much horror media as I possibly can. I'm going to try to hit up some horror conventions. I haven't been to one in a while. It's actually been a few years, and Arizona does have some good ones. So, that's something I'm also looking forward to this year. What horror movies are you guys looking forward to? What are some of your most anticipated horror movies of the year? I would love to know your thoughts. So please leave your comments down below. Share your likes, your dislikes. What did you think of Lee Winnall's Wolfman? Did you find it as boring and disappointing as I did? Let me know. And what are some of your favorite werewolf movies? But anyway, guys, thank you so much again for joining me in my conversation of 2025's Wolfman. Wolfman! I needed a nap after this movie. Anyway, horror fam, thank you so much again. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to my channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. It is really good to be back. I know it's been a couple of months since I released a video, so thank you so much again for joining me on this journey, guys. You guys are terrific, and as always, stay scary and stay doggone cool.